hair. Get thee behind me. Whew. All right, let's dive in. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is RaiBshaw and I am a writer of YA historical fiction, currently working on my debut novel Untamable, the story of a young woman in the old American West who attempts to break free of her father's sinister expectations and winds up an accidental outlaw instead. Pitches are hard, yo. I usually avoid giving a pitch of my story in my videos because I never quite know exactly what to say. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to share with you 7 things that door-to-door sales taught me about writing. I know that sounds a little bit random, but bear with me. Just hang in there and you'll see what I mean. In 2014, I spent the summer working as a bug girl selling pest control door-to-door in Dallas, Texas. I was 23 years old. I had just returned from 18 months of missionary work in Brazil. I had no job, I had no college degree, and I had no money to pay for one. Now, I'm gonna be honest to you, the idea of going around and knocking on complete strangers' doors and trying to sell a product to them was not something that had ever appealed to me in my life. However, when I got home from Brazil, I was faced with 2 options. I could either live with my parents for the summer and find a minimum wage job to help me pay for school in the fall, or I could go travel by myself to Texas, a place I had never been before, and do summer sales and potentially make enough money to not have to work during the fall and pay for school and living expenses. Having just come from a foreign country where I was really used to talking to complete strangers every day on the street, traveling by myself to locations I had never been to before, and making friends with whoever I met along the way, I actually really liked the idea of going to Texas. It sounded more adventurous, it sounded more exciting, it sounded a lot scarier, and I kind of liked that. Once you've done something really scary and adventurous like that, it is hard to come home to normal life and just try to settle into a boring job. I had that fire of adventure lit in me already, and so I just rode the flames all the way to Texas. So I flew to Dallas, where I was picked up by one of the exterminator truck guys because they had forgotten to arrange a ride for me. He drove me to this really big apartment complex where I was going to be living, and just dropped me off there in the parking lot and was like, well, I don't know where the room is, but I've got to go and spray some pesticides on a house, and he drove away. I did manage to find the right apartment. It was some guy's apartment and there was nobody home, and I just sat there by myself the whole day reading from the sales manual, and then slowly throughout the day some good-looking young salesmen started trickling in, and by nightfall I found myself the only girl in an apartment full of good-looking salesmen. It sounds like it should be a dream come true, but it was scary for me because I had just been a missionary and guys were off limits, and so I was like, oh my gosh! I was the only female in the room. I was also the only person not wearing the white company polo and gray pants. So needless to say, I felt very out of place there. And if you've never been surrounded by a bunch of young salesmen, it feels like an after game party. One that I wasn't technically invited to, and I don't know how I found myself there. Kind of scary. So all these guys were really excited because they had just spent the day selling and they were proud of themselves and patting themselves on the backs, and I thought, well, that's encouraging. They all spent the whole day walking out in the hot sunshine, knocking on doors, and probably got a lot of rejection, and they all still seem really positive. I was like, okay, it can't be that bad, right? So that night, they took me to my apartment that I shared with 3 other girls, all 3 of whom did not stay the entire summer. I was the only girl who stayed the whole summer. Other girls came and went, one of whom was actually my mother. That's a story for another day. We woke up every morning at about 6 a.m., read from the sales manual over breakfast. Straight from breakfast, we walked to our team leader's apartment building. Every morning we had our sales meeting. The first element of the meeting was to talk about what went well the day before and what we would like to improve upon. We would learn different sales techniques, and then we would get really pumped because if anybody who's worked in sales, you know sales can be It's a lot of hard work, and so it's really important to keep your energy up and to keep positive. Every morning we would get super pumped. It was like a sporting event. I'm not kidding you. We would like need cheerleaders and be each other's cheerleaders, and we would watch super motivational videos that just make you want to be like, yes, I am powerful, I can do anything. And then we would do role playing for like half an hour to an hour. We would receive our individual routes for the day, hit the cars, and drive out to the location. Sometimes it took an hour or two to get there. We were all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I would be dropped off in my area for the day, and usually I would start knocking at about 9 o'clock in the morning and knock from 9 a.m. until noon, at which time whoever had a car in my team would come and pick me up. We would go to lunch, and then they'd drop me off again, and then I would hit the doors again from 1 o'clock until nightfall. In the summertime in Texas, nightfall is actually around almost 11 o'clock at night. I never knocked until 11 o'clock at night because I felt like that's rude. I always stopped knocking at 9 o'clock at the latest, but some of the other sales guys, they would knock hardcore until it was too dark and people were going to bed. And so if they were the ones driving me, I just had to sit there on the sidewalk in the dark until somebody came to pick me up. And it was like hot because Texas summers are hot. I'm walking in the sun all day long, lathering on my sunscreen. I got my little clipboard. I hated it and I loved it. Of course, the fun part was I got to work with this team and get to be really good friends with them. Some of those friends are actually still doing this. They still go out every single summer and sell pest control. I'm like, man, kudos to you. I did it for one summer and that was enough for me. That's really interesting, really, but what does any of this have to do with writing? I hear you. Let's get into it. The first thing that door-to-door sales taught me about writing is to know your pitch. Going out and knocking on complete strangers' doors one after the other, you get really nervous. Just you don't even know. Maybe some of you are getting anxiety even at the thought of going up to some stranger's house and knocking on the door and having something to say. Believe me, it is very anxiety inducing. You get this rush of adrenaline and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I am obnoxious. But by that point, you've been super hyped up because you went to this sales meeting and they got you all excited about the money that you're gonna make and how much people need the services and all this stuff. When you're standing there at somebody's door and they open up, they look you from head to toe and they can see, oh, you're a pest control salesperson. I've already seen 3 of you this week. Get off my lawn. It was super important to know my pitch so that I'd have something to say immediately before they kicked me off their porch. To be fair, Texans are incredibly friendly people. I could probably count on one hand how many people kicked me off their porch the entire summer. When you have all of 1 second to catch somebody's attention, to let them know why you're there, why you're taking up their time, why you are bothering them at their home, and what it is that you have to offer them. I needed to know my pitch well enough that I could say it right then in the midst of all my anxieties and fears, meeting somebody's eyes, seeing the judgment in them. To not let that affect me, I needed to know what it was that I had to say to them. I practiced my pitch every single day. I knew that pitch front and back. It's the same concept as your book. You need to know your pitch because especially when people know that you're a writer, guaranteed you're gonna have people asking you, what's your book about? What are you writing about? I get asked that question so often, and I'm sure that you do too. It always makes me freeze because I'm like, oh no, I've got 1 second to let them know that I'm a real writer and that my book is interesting and that it's worth reading. And no matter what I say, no matter what comes out my mouth, my book sounds dumb. And I'm like, it sounds dumb, but believe me, it's really good if you read it. I hope, I think. And so that's why it's really important to practice a pitch. Even if you're not going to say that same pitch word for word exactly how you wrote it every single time somebody asks you what your book is about, the more you write pitches and the more you get used to saying it and repeating it to yourself, practicing it with other people, the more natural it's going to be when you're in that moment and the anxiety hits you and somebody asks you, what's your book about? The words will come out and you'll be able to explain what it is that your book is about without looking like this guilty, shivering, little scared mouse. The second thing that I learned is that positive visualizations and daily affirmations really work. There was this book I was introduced to when I was doing summer sales called The Greatest Salesman in the World by, I think it's Og Mandino. This book, you'd think it's just for salespeople, but no. This book is a parable. It's kind of like a self-help book, but it illustrates all of these lessons through a story. I found it. We actually just rearranged our entire room, so that's why this angle suddenly looks a little bit different. We still have a lot of stuff in boxes from when we moved, and this was packed away, and I really wanted it for the filming of this video, and I could not find it anywhere. So I'm really, really excited that I found this book. It follows a young man named Hadid, who is a camel boy and wants to become a great salesman. He works for the greatest salesman in the world. And this takes place in like ancient Jerusalem, Damascus area. It's kind of like this, got this Middle Eastern vibe. Hadid goes to his master, the greatest salesman in the world, and says, hey, I'm in love with this girl and I really want to become a great salesman like you so that I can have as much wealth as you have so I can provide for this girl and her father will allow me to marry her. So the greatest salesman tells Hadid, this occupation that you have chosen can give you great wealth. However, it is also a very challenging occupation and most who try fail. And in order to have success and to reap the rewards of being successful, you have to be able to overcome great obstacles. One item after another, he has to go out and sell in order to prove his determination to actually be a salesman. And then the master gives him these 10 scrolls of wisdom that he has used to become the greatest salesman in the world. And it's like super, super thin. You can read this book in like an hour. It's a super light read. And the first couple of chapters are like a page or two each. They are the story. And then the rest of the chapters of the book are what is contained within each scroll. And each of the scrolls basically are the positive affirmations that he needs to constantly be repeating to himself and practicing throughout the day to become the greatest salesman. When my mother came out to sell with me, we got this book on audiobook. And every morning when we were driving out to location, we would just listen to it and listen to the affirmations and think, yeah, I can do this. I really can. And we would visualize ourselves having success. And I can tell you, it made a huge difference. It actually works. It sounds hokey, it sounds cheesy, but it's so true. The more you can visualize yourself having success, the more you're willing to try things that you probably wouldn't otherwise try. And the more confidence it gives you to pull things off that you might not be able to pull off if you were not feeling confident enough to do it. I've tried to take this into my writing as well. It's hard to sit down and write if I have in my head that it's going to be a flop or it's going to be a failure, no one's going to want to read it, or I'm not the right writer for this book, or any number of those silly little fearful excuses that we come up with as writers. I learned from summer sales the importance of creating a positive visual in my head. So every time I sit down to write, to just envision myself having a successful writing session, for my book to be a success, something that people are going to like to read, something that I'm going to like to read. And practicing different affirmations can also be helpful. In fact, that's something that I want to get better about doing before starting a writing session every day, is actually doing the affirmations. It's been a while since I've done that, but I'd like to get back into it because I'm remembering that really helped in summer sales and it would be really helpful in my writing as well. The third lesson I learned is that the anticipation is the worst part. And it's so true. Going out and knocking on a stranger's door to sell something to them is scary. It's really scary and it's hard, especially because I know nobody likes a salesperson. Nobody wants a salesperson knocking on their door. The anticipation, just thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard, and imagining myself going up and knocking on someone's door was so terrifying every morning for the whole summer. No matter how many times I had done it throughout the summer, every single day going to that first door was just as hard as it had been the first time I did it. And that's because the anticipation is worse than once you're actually doing it. Driving out to my area for the day, walking up to that first door, building up in my mind, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Please, please don't make me do it. It always was scary and it always felt like something I don't want to do and I wanted to run away. But once I had knocked on the door, the deed was done, someone was gonna answer it, and then somebody answered it, and I always survived, you know? I made it through, and after that, it wasn't so hard. And then going and knocking on the next door was easier, and it got easier and easier throughout the day to just knock on doors and talk to people and realize, yeah, this isn't actually so bad. And writing is like that too. The anticipation is worse than the reality, especially if you've gone a long time without writing. building up in your head, oh, I need to write, I need to write. All that anticipation is worse than when you actually just sit down and start writing. Writing a book sounds scary until you're actually doing it. And then it's just like, well, I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna think about it anymore. When you're having a lot of anxiety about your writing and you're having a hard time getting yourself to just sit down in the chair and do it, just remember, the anticipation is worse than the reality. It's scarier to think about it than to actually do it. So just do it. So the fourth one is starting is always hard, but it does get easier. Hey, it's me again. I just wanted to step right in and make a last minute change here. As I'm doing my edits, I realized that my third and fourth lessons are pretty much identical, just worded differently. And I separated them out because I saw differences in my head, but as I'm listening to how I described each of them, they sound exactly the same. So I'm actually going to change number 4 to a different lesson that I learned and actually just forgot to include, and that is that money is not motivation enough. Now, obviously, money was motivation enough to get me out there doing sales in the first place, but it was not enough to keep me out there doing sales once I found how difficult it was. Constantly, I would find myself thinking, yeah, no amount of money is worth this. I had to find something else that made it worth it. And for me, that was the people that I met and being able to help them. There were a lot of times during the summer where, because I was going door to door, I ended up in the right place at the right time to help somebody. Sometimes that was by selling them pest control because they had really terrible infestations and had not been able to find anything that could help. And I was an answer to their prayer and they were really excited to see me, and that felt good. A lot of the time it had nothing to do with sales and everything to do with the fact that I was out there going door to door and was just there when people needed me. There was one time I remember I knocked on a woman's door. Her ex-husband had just taken their dog from her. She was about to lose her house. She was just feeling really lonely and having a hard time. And I just happened to knock on her door right at that moment when she needed someone to talk to, and she asked if I would walk with her. And so we just went for a walk for like an hour and talked, and I actually stayed in contact with her for the rest of the summer. We would text each other, check in on one another, see how each other was doing. And obviously I didn't end up selling anything to her, but that's the kind of interaction that made summer sales meaningful to me. It was the people that I got to meet. It was the experiences that I got to have just because I was there. I wasn't stuck behind a desk, or I'm sure I could have had really meaningful experiences working a minimum wage job at home as well. But I was in Texas. It was a different experience for me, and the experiences, the people that I met, those are the things that made it worth it to me when it was hard, and that's what kept me going. And I find the same thing to be true with my writing. If I were writing just to make money, I would have given up a long time ago, because I think the chances of me making money at this are slim at best, and this is really challenging. Writing has a way of making you face your inner demons that you did not even know you have. Writing has made me dig deeper than is comfortable a lot of the time, and it is so challenging that often I find myself wondering, do I even like writing? Is this even worth it? And if I was doing it with the hope of making a quick buck somewhere, I would not stick with it. For writing to be worth it, you have to get something else out of it other than the hopes of money. You know, you have to have something else that motivates you. And for me, what motivates me in my writing is just that I love my characters, I love my story, and I want to be able to share it. The community that I have found here on AuthorTube and elsewhere as a writer has also been really fulfilling for me, and so these are the kinds of things that motivate me. Lesson number 5, my product has value. This was the biggest lesson that I had to learn doing summer sales, because if I didn't believe in the product that I was selling, it came through in my voice, in my eyes, in my face, in my body language, and people knew. And I felt like I was lying to people, and I was like, this is not worth it. Why would I come out here and try to sell something to people that they just don't need? I couldn't do it. I could not actually start to sell until I felt good about what it was that I was selling. And so that's why it was really important for me to every day study up on the product and make sure it was something I actually believed in. And if I couldn't, I would have gone home, because there was no way I was going to go knock on people's doors and lie to them about a product that was going to get rid of their bugs if it wasn't. You should never try to sell something that you don't believe in. And it's the same way with your writing. If you don't believe what you're writing, maybe you need to write something else. Otherwise, Recognize that your product has value. The book that you're writing is valuable. Your words have value. Pour that value into your book and trust it and believe in it. And that's something that the book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, really helped me with, is learning to recognize when what I have to offer does have value. I'd highly recommend that book. It was really great. Lesson number 6 goes along with that one, and that is that there's someone out there who wants this. Selling door to door, if I got rejection after rejection after rejection, sometimes I felt like, okay, well, obviously nobody needs this, and why am I even trying anymore? And I would have given up and not stayed out there the whole summer. I had to remind myself to be able to stay positive. There is someone out here who wants this, and I did find those people. There were some people that this was the right product for them. This is what they were looking for. I just happened to come at the right time. They were really happy to see me, and they were excited to buy the product, and it all worked out, and they were happily taken care of and pest-free in their homes. But if I didn't believe that those people were out there, that there was somebody out there who wanted it, I wouldn't have kept going, because nothing that hard is worth doing if nobody wants it. And that's the same thing with my book. Sometimes I can get discouraged looking at the most popular books of the day and seeing that, okay, well, that's what most people seem to want to read. Most people want to read fantasy, or most people want to read romance, or, whatever. And sometimes I can think to myself, nobody really seems to want to read a Western. What if nobody even wants this book that I'm writing? And I have to remind myself, there is somebody out there who wants my book. Even if it's a small handful of people, there's somebody out there who's looking for a book just like the one that I'm writing. There's somebody out there who is looking for a book like the one that you are writing. Number 7, what I'm selling is not for everyone, and that's okay. As important as it is to keep in mind that there is somebody out there who wants your book, it's just as important to remember that not everybody will, and that that's okay. When I was doing sales, the goal was not to sell to every single person, because there's no such thing as a product that's equally good for everybody. Everybody has different needs. If I was trying to sell to every person, I would have been a snake oil salesman. I would have had to be lying to people and pretending the product does things that it doesn't do in order to fit their circumstances. I had to be really honest when I was out there selling. If I was on somebody's doorstep and they asked me, well, does it do this? I'd have to tell them, no, it doesn't. Is that something you need? And if they said yes, then I'd be like, okay, well, this is not the product for you. And then we would part on good terms, totally happy. Or sometimes they already had a service they were using, and I would compare with them. I would try to see, could I possibly save them money? Could I possibly give them a better service? And if I couldn't do anything for them that they weren't already getting, I would tell them, well, sounds like you've got a great service there. I'd stick with them. Okay, have a good day. Bye. But then, other people, there were times when they were spending way too much money for a product that I knew was not that great, and I was able to offer them something better, and that always felt good. It felt good that, hey, I just saved somebody some money. And that reminded me, okay, this is why I'm out here. I'm out here to provide a service to people. I'm out here to give them something that they actually need or that they actually want. I'm not here to convince somebody who doesn't need or want this that they need to spend money on it. That was the goal, was just to sell to everybody. I think I would have been really miserable, and most of those sales would have fallen through eventually, and I wouldn't have gotten the commission anyway. I feel like that's been really important with my book as well, to remember that this book is not for everybody, and if I try to please everybody, I'll end up pleasing nobody. Who are you writing this book for? What is your goal with this book? And write for that group. You're writing this for the people who are looking for this kind of thing, and you're not writing this book to please everybody, because that's not going to work out. I mean, look at the last Star Wars movie, people. I'm just saying. It does not work to try to please everybody. Your book is not for everybody, and that's okay, because there is somebody out there who wants it, and it's exactly the book that they're looking for, and they're going to love it and truly treasure it, and other people are going to be like, meh, not for me. And you know what? That's okay. That's why there's other books out there. That's why there are so many different kinds of writers and so many different kinds of books. So those were the 7 lessons that I learned from doing door-to-door sales. I'd really love to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck with your writing, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.
Would you come and take a walk with me? We'll cross over the mountains and we'll reach the pale blue sea. I love you, I'm so glad you love me too. And I wrote this song for you, every word